Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. If you're using this to fall asleep, get cozy, and relax, don't forget to subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Alright, let's get into the story. This happened to me about 3 years ago, on the first day of ninth grade. I was heading out my front door, ready to start the new school year. My grandpa owned a large van that looked a bit like an ice cream truck, and it almost completely blocked my view of the left side of our driveway. As I walked closer to my grandma's car, she was still locking up the house. I heard faint humming, a tune I didn't recognize at the time but later learned was Piece of My Heart by Janis Joplin. Curious, I ran to the side of the van to see what was going on. There, I saw a woman with wildly unkempt, frizzy dark brown hair, caressing the van in an almost sensual way. At first, I didn't think she'd noticed me, but before I could turn to get help, she started speaking without looking at me. It wasn't unusual for people to offer to buy the van. It was pretty cool, but I knew Janis Joplin had been dead for decades, so this was instantly creepy. I turned to look for my grandma, who had gone back inside, probably to grab her cigarettes, as she often did. When I looked back at the woman, she was suddenly right in my face, so close I could smell her breath. It had an earthy stench, like she'd been eating dirt. She looked incredibly unhealthy, her skin pale and gaunt. I noticed she was wearing a white hospital-style nightgown and clutching a dog tag around her neck, partially covering it with her hand. Her eyes were such a pale blue that I wondered if she might be blind. As a 14-year-old girl who was scared of everything, I completely lost my composure. I tried to bolt back to the yard, but her cold, clammy hand clamped onto my wrist so tightly it hurt. "Do you like to rock and roll, little lady?" she whispered in my ear. That was the final straw. I screamed for my grandparents to come outside. Before I knew it, my grandpa came stomping out, threatening to call the police and warning that he was armed. The woman vanished. Unfortunately, that wasn't the last I saw of the Janis Joplin lady. After school that day, I was home alone, sitting in the living room watching TV and doing homework, a normal routine for me. A few days earlier, my family had held a yard sale, so our stuff was still set up on tables in the backyard. We always left things out like that when we planned to reopen the sale, and we never had issues. Suddenly, I heard the tarp moving and the sound of glass clinking together. I peered out the bathroom window, which overlooked the yard, and saw the same woman laying our items out on the grass. I was scared but felt safe inside the house, so I yelled through the window for her to stop or I'd call the police. This didn't faze her. She ran up to the window and started screaming curses at me, looking like a rabid animal. I ran to the kitchen to grab the phone and started dialing 911, but it rang before I could finish. It was a family friend asking if I was okay. He'd driven by, seen the woman in our yard, and called the police. I thanked him, and he said he'd circle back to help me talk to the officers. It turned out the woman had escaped from a mental ward just a few blocks from my house. The dog tag she was clutching was her ID. When the police arrested her, she was trying to cut them with a broken plate she'd taken from our yard sale. She kept screaming that I'd assaulted her and threatened to mutilate me. The whole ordeal was terrifying, but at least she was caught. Back in 2006, I was a sophomore in high school, a bit of a popular outcast. I had plenty of friends but never quite fit into any specific clique. So I surrounded myself with others who were in the same boat, misfits who didn't belong to any one group. At the start of that school year, a wave of new students arrived, but one guy immediately caught my attention. I knew we had to be friends. Let's call him Derek. He was tall, bulky, with some muscle tone. Not exactly ripped, but he had a solid presence. He was the bad boy type, with a short mohawk and a bunch of tattoos, which was pretty unusual for our preppy rich kid high school. Naturally, my best friend Ann and I were drawn to him. We first noticed Derek and his mom sitting in front of us during orientation. His edgy style stood out, and we couldn't help but talk about him. He quickly became the guy every girl in school was swooning over, even catching the eye of some older students. One girl in particular, let's call her Ashley, was especially into him. She was a year older than us, a popular stoner type with a free-spirited vibe, always surrounded by friends and at least one guy. Derek was clearly into her too. But there was a problem. She already had a boyfriend, Jason. Before long, though, Ashley and Derek started dating, and most of us were thrilled for them. Everyone, that is, except Jason. Jason didn't like Derek from the start, but when Derek stole Ashley, something in him snapped. Jason was tall and lanky, not particularly muscular, and kind of scrawny. Shortly after Derek and Ashley got together, rumors started spreading like wildfire. People claimed Ashley had been assaulted and was pregnant by Derek, and there were wild stories about Derek's past. And I knew these were lies, but most kids at school didn't bother to check the facts and just ate up the gossip. Things got rough for Derek. People constantly harassed him, trying to pick fights. Up until then, Derek had stayed out of trouble. He'd never gotten into arguments or fights, despite the rumors and hostility. But everything came to a head one day. Derek showed up to school angrier than we'd ever seen him. We asked what was wrong, and he told us Jason wouldn't leave Ashley alone. Apparently, Jason had been calling her nonstop over the weekend, and Derek had had enough. We tried to calm him down to keep him from confronting Jason, but nothing worked. The moment Derek saw Jason step off the school bus, he marched over and punched him square in the face hard. Jason crumpled to the ground, blood pouring from his nose and mouth. According to the principal, on the way to the hospital, Jason went into convulsions and had blood coming from his ears. About a week later, Jason returned to school. Derek, meanwhile, had been sent to a detention school for a month. Anna and I steered clear of Jason, and he did the same with us. The day Derek was supposed to come back to school, he was sick and stayed home. That day is burned into my memory, and no matter how hard I try, I can't forget it. Right after lunch, the school went into lockdown. No one was allowed to leave their classrooms, and no one knew why. The lockdown lasted an hour and a half, but it felt like 4 hours. Ann and I were in the same classroom, goofing off, joking that maybe one of our stoner friends got caught with weed or something. At the end of the lockdown, the school resource officer came to our classroom and asked Ann and me to follow him to the office. When we got there, the principal told us Jason had been arrested. Another student had seen the handle of a gun sticking out of Jason's pants when he bent over to grab his backpack. Jason had brought a loaded .45 and multiple knives to school. As if that wasn't horrifying enough, the principal laid a piece of paper in front of us. It was a hit list written by Jason, a junior in high school. I looked down and read the names 1 Derek, 2, and 3 me. I broke down crying. While Ann and I had been laughing and messing around in class, this guy was on a mission to kill us. When they arrested him, Jason was outside the girls' bathroom near the lunchroom, the same place Ann and I went every day. He had first lunch, while we had third lunch, about an hour and a half later. The school went into lockdown right after his lunch, and he was apprehended just before second lunch began. I don't know if he would have actually gone through with it or chickened out, but if he had, I might not be here today. It's not something I think about every day anymore, but when I do, I feel the same panic I felt when that list was placed in front of me. This happened when I was 10 years old, in my bedroom. I'd always had trouble sleeping, spending most nights tossing and turning. As a kid, I was a huge horror movie fan, so being scared wasn't something I experienced often. I wasn't afraid of the dark, and strange noises or odd occurrences didn't faze me much. But I knew when to get out of a bad situation or find a trusted adult. I always slept with my closet doors open, which becomes important later. Our family home was in a heavily wooded area, out in the middle of nowhere. One night, around 1 a.m., I woke up to a sound coming from under my bed. It sounded like one of my cats scratching themselves or thumping around. I'd heard this noise before, and it was always one of my furry friends, so I didn't bother checking. I closed my eyes and tried to go back to sleep. I rolled onto my left side, facing the wall my bed was pushed against. When I heard the sound again, I figured my cat was right beneath me and mumbled, "Good night," before drifting off again. The next time I woke up, I was met with a surreal and terrifying sight. My sheet and comforter were no longer covering me. Standing over my bed was a man, poking me with his finger. The way he did it was horrifying, not like a playful jab between friends, but as if he was touching a human for the first time, exploring the sensation of his fingertip pressing into my skin. It was so bizarre, so impossibly strange, that I thought I was dreaming. I tried desperately to wake myself up, but nothing worked. He kept poking my chest, my belly, my legs, my arms. Paralyzed with fear, I screamed, "Wake up!" At that, the man threw himself to the floor and closed his eyes, as if pretending to be asleep or dead. I had no idea what was happening. That's when I realized this couldn't be a dream. Somehow, I found the strength to move. I leaped from the top of my bed, over the man on the floor, and ran toward my parents' room. But when I reached their bedroom door, something stopped me. I told myself this was impossible. There was no way someone could have gotten into our house. We always kept every door and window locked at night. I'd had strange experiences before, especially when half asleep, and after talking to my parents about them, I knew my mind could play tricks. I don't know why, but instead of waking my parents, I decided to check the house for signs of a break-in. I found nothing out of place, no broken windows, no tampered locks, no busted doors. I convinced myself I'd been dreaming or hallucinating, blaming my obsession with horror movies. I crept back down the long dark hallway to my bedroom, peeked inside, and saw no one. I turned on the light, got down on the floor just outside the doorway, and looked under the bed. Nothing. I checked both windows for signs of forced entry, but they were closed and locked. I knew it. I'd been imagining things. I crawled back into bed and turned on the TV to calm myself down and distract from the terrifying dream or hallucination. I flipped to a boring channel, placed the remote on my bedside table, and lay on my right side, facing away from the wall. As my eyes adjusted to the dim room, lit only by the faint glow of the TV, I saw something that made my heart sink. Inside my closet, with one door now slightly closed, stood the man. He was perfectly still, facing the wall, hiding, waiting for me to fall asleep, I assumed. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. I stared at him for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, hoping he wouldn't notice, desperate to get my dad to catch him. I tiptoed to my parents' room, as silent as I could, and shook both my mom and dad awake. "Shh, don't make a sound," I whispered. "There's someone in my closet." They bolted upright, and I repeated myself, urging them to call 911. My mom grabbed the phone immediately. Neither of them doubted me. They knew I was honest and could tell from my face that this was real. My dad said he was going to check and told my mom and me to stay in their room and lock the door. We did. I was beyond terrified, unsure what this man was capable of, whether he had a weapon or if my dad was safe. I stood there with my mom, crying, waiting. After what felt like forever, my dad knocked and said it was him, safe to open the door. When my mom let him in, I blurted, "Did you get him?" He looked at me with a confused, unsettling expression and said, "There's no one there." I insisted there was a man in my room, that he'd been poking me. My dad said he'd searched every inch of the house and found nothing. He checked the doors and windows, just as I had, and everything was secure. Then it hit me he must have had a key. The moment I said it, my parents exchanged a look of pure terror. Our closest neighbor, a trusted family friend we considered family, had a key to our house. She'd babysat me since I was a toddler and was the only person outside our immediate family with access. The police arrived soon after, took statements, checked the property, and left. None of us slept that night. The next day, my dad went to our neighbor's house and asked about her key. She said she had it, but when she went to show him, it was gone. Her home showed no signs of a break-in, and she always kept her doors and windows locked. My parents changed all the locks and decided never to give anyone a key again, except in emergencies. I never learned who that man was or how he got into our house. The experience left me traumatized, and it took years to come to terms with it. My sleep issues turned into full-blown insomnia, and for about a decade, I couldn't sleep without a light on. It's been roughly 20 years since that night, and aside from my parents, I've never told anyone about it until now. My heart goes out to anyone who's experienced trauma, and I hope you find peace. I'm a 32-year-old woman living with my mother in a very rural area. Our house is surrounded by miles of dense forest, with our driveway being the only clear path to the main road. Our nearest neighbors, who are family, live on either side, and you can't see our house from the road. Because of this, I've always felt safe and never thought twice about keeping doors open or stepping outside without being fully dressed. Running to the storage shed in just a shirt is normal for me, and I usually leave both the front and back doors open during the day. It's always felt secure until recently. It gets brutally hot where I live, often over 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. We recently got a pool in the backyard, which was great, but I've been taking medication that makes my skin blister in direct sunlight. The pool is in a spot that gets sun from sunrise until about 3 hours before sunset, so that's when I'd swim. For the first couple of days, it was pure bliss. I'd stay in the water until well after dark, loving every moment. But about 3 days in, I started feeling uneasy about being in the pool alone after my mom got out or going in without her. She usually joined me because I'd been sick, and she worried that with all the meds I was on, I might pass out and drown. There was no real reason for my unease. It was my own backyard. No one could see me back there, and I have 2 yappy Jack Russell Terriers who bark at the slightest hint of a stranger. The last time I felt this kind of dread was when I was walking in the woods behind the house and realized a mountain lion was stalking me. My gut was telling me something was off, but I kept brushing it aside. A week passed, and I stopped staying out after dark. By sunset, I was always inside. Then came the moment that made me trust my danger sense for good. I've been in the pool for about 20 minutes since my mom got out. I was feeling tired earlier than usual, so I stopped swimming and just floated, bobbing in the water with my head tilted back, gazing at the fluffy white clouds and a clear blue sky. It was peaceful, relaxing. If my ears had been underwater, I probably wouldn't have heard it. A soft crackling, like dry leaves being crunched underfoot. I shot upright and looked around but saw nothing. Thinking it might be the dogs, I swam to the side of the pool where the sound came from, pulled myself up and peered over the edge, expecting to see them. But there was nothing. Confused, I swam around the entire pool, checking every side, still nothing. I told myself it was probably a squirrel and started to relax back into the water when I heard it again. The soft crunch of leaves, followed by a twig snapping, coming from the tree line. I called for the dogs, knowing they loved chasing things into the woods, but there was total silence. I ducked below the pool's edge and waited. Less than a minute later, I heard it again, clearly coming from the trees directly across from me. I poked my head up and stared hard in that direction. The sound stopped. I kept staring, but I'm nearsighted and didn't have my glasses in the pool, so all I saw was a blurry mix of green and brown trees. I ducked down, did a quick lap, and paused by the ladder. That's when I got out as fast as my waterlogged body could move, grabbed my towel and shoes, and bolted inside. I told my mom what I'd heard, but like me, she assumed it was the dogs since they were outside at the time. I explained that 2 hyper Jack Russells couldn't make slow, careful steps like that, and they definitely would have come running when I called. My theory was that it was a mountain lion prowling, and I decided not to go back out for the rest of the day to let it move on. I hopped in the shower to rinse off the chlorine, mostly putting it out of my mind when a chilling realization hit me. Those footsteps sounded familiar, but I hadn't placed them until that moment. They weren't the steps of a 4-legged animal. They were like the ones I'd make when hiking back there. They were human. I finished my shower as calmly as I could and told my mom my theory, but she still didn't believe me. 2 days later, a massive storm rolled through. Not much rain, but howling winds that toppled trees and thunder that shook the house. From the first boom, I was wide awake, lying in bed, hoping it would pass. After about an hour, the power went out. Without electricity and the usual background noise, it was eerily quiet except for the constant rumbles and booms of thunder. Unable to sleep, I got up to find a lantern and use the bathroom. I took one step out of my room and froze. The rumbling I'd heard wasn't just thunder. Someone was on the back stairs, pulling at the back door. It looks like a standard wooden door, but is actually steel, and the rattling was the metal door shaking in its frame, blending with the thunder. Our house layout has my bedroom at one end, the bathroom next to it, then the back door in a hall leading to the kitchen. I was feet away from whoever was trying to get in. I stood frozen, my body cold and trembling. After a few more minutes of rattling, it stopped, and I heard angry footsteps head down the stairs, not toward the road, but into the woods. I crawled back into bed and hid under the covers like a scared kid until morning. Why didn't I wake my mom? Why didn't the dogs bark? Why didn't I call the cops? The power was out, and I knew my cell phone was dead, so calling was impossible. My mom has a history of dismissing my concerns about danger, and I didn't trust her not to make things worse by going outside to prove no one was there. As for the dogs, they're fearless except during storms. They hide under the couch when it rains. For nearly 2 weeks, nothing else happened. I avoided the pool and made sure the doors were locked at night, and life went back to normal. One day, I just got up and headed for the shower. Both doors were open, but my mom was in the living room with the dogs, so I felt safe. I closed the bathroom door, but didn't lock it. Halfway through my shower, I heard a loud thump inside the room. I thought the towels had fallen off the counter, but when I pulled back the curtain, they were still there. Then I noticed the bathroom door was cracked open. Someone had opened it, hitting the trash can I'd placed over the floor vent in front of the door. I assumed it was my mom and went back to showering, figuring she'd push the can aside if she needed it. When I got out, I went to the living room and found no one. My mom and the dogs were gone. Just then, she walked in with the mail and the dogs. I asked what she'd wanted, and she said she'd left for the mailbox right after I got in the shower, with the dogs following her. It definitely wasn't her who opened the door. I didn't want to scare her or be dismissed again, so I just said I thought I'd heard her say something and left it at that. But whoever it was had been trying to be sneaky, likely fleeing when they hit the trash can and thought I'd been alerted. That was 3 days ago. I haven't called the police because I have no proof. Everything has only happened to me. Despite not being an overdramatic liar, my past mental health and anxiety issues have made people paint me that way. Even if I call the cops, I'd probably just get a "there's nothing we can do" response. As for the footsteps in the woods, I think the person didn't realize how bad my eyesight is. The sound stopped when I stared their way, because they thought I'd seen them. When I ducked down, they assumed I hadn't and probably thought I was floating with my ears underwater, unable to hear clearly. Update: this evening my aunt, who lives next door, called the police and someone was taken away. I wasn't there, so I don't know the details, but I'll ask her tomorrow and share what I find out. Update: here's what I know. My aunt came home from work and found the gate to the road leading into the woods open, with the lock broken. The road is on her land, but mostly used by a quarry on the other side of the woods. She started down the road to investigate when she heard gunshots from the woods. Being smart, she called the police. When they arrived, they found a man in his late teens or early 20s at the quarry. He'd shot up the supervisor's trailer and loaded stolen equipment onto his ATV. He was arrested, and the supervisor told my aunt they dealt with him before. He'd been underage the first few times he caused trouble, and they recovered their stolen items, so they let it go. This time, they're pressing charges, and he's going to jail. He'd also been stealing from my aunt's storage, destroying fences, and causing general trouble. I think if this is the guy who was at my house, he may have come to rob us, not realizing I was home. I'm not sure he ever saw my mom and me together. He might have thought only one woman lived here. When my mom left for the mailbox, he probably assumed the house was empty, and the sound of the shower confused him, so he opened the bathroom door to check instead of going straight for whatever he wanted to steal. He's been sneaking around our property, stealing and causing havoc for at least 3 years without us knowing. I think he got cocky and careless and finally got caught. I'm hoping this is the end of it, and there isn't another creep out there in the middle of nowhere looking to do more than steal. The only thing still unexplained is what he was doing that night during the storm, pulling on our back door. It was the middle of the night, and both our vehicles were in the front yard. He had to know we were home. If anything else happens, I'll update again, but for now, I'm hoping this is over. My city is a historic naval town, and to keep some anonymity for everyone involved, including myself, I won't say where it is. Its long, vibrant history has left parts of it abandoned and derelict, making it a goldmine for urban explorers like me. Scattered across the city are various abandoned buildings, ripe for discovery. One day, my 2 friends, let's call them A and B, and I'll go by C, were walking along the seafront to meet some others for a beach barbecue. As we passed what looked like an active naval base from a distance, something caught our eye. The buildings appeared intact, well-maintained, with radars still perched on top and windows that didn't seem smashed. But what made us do a double take was the complete absence of naval or security personnel. A base this well kept should have guards at the gate and people milling about, but from where we stood, it was lifeless. Curious, we took a quick detour to investigate further, walking along the seafront to get a better view. The base was made up of several buildings along the shore, a few smaller ones and two large main structures. Most of the smaller buildings and the two big ones were clustered together, while two smaller buildings sat about half a mile away at the other end of the compound. You could see the foundations of demolished buildings along the perimeter. To the north, a slope led down to a barbed wire gate connecting to another base, which was clearly active, with spinning radars and visible security personnel. The main access to the abandoned compound was a gravel road linked to a housing estate northwest of the site. We were cutting through that estate to reach the walkway west of the compound, which ran along the south side and curved around to the east. As we walked along the south side, we confirmed our suspicions. The place was empty. Loose cables dangled from inactive CCTV cameras and smashed windows on the seafront side sealed it. This was an abandoned site. Our urban exploration instincts kicked into overdrive, but we had to rein them in. It was broad daylight, there were too many people around, and we were unprepared with no equipment. So we decided to come back later that night. When night fell, we made our way to the compound, buzzing with a mix of anxiety and excitement. This was probably our biggest exploration yet, both a thrilling challenge and a logistical puzzle. We didn't know the entry and exit points for the compound or the buildings, whether other explorers had been here, or if anyone, maybe someone desperate for shelter, had taken up semi-permanent residence. I mean, if I were homeless and needed a roof, I wouldn't hesitate. None of us mentioned anything about the paranormal, but nothing was going to stop us. Past experiences had taught us to handle whatever came our way, or so we thought. As we approached, the compound's looming darkness was almost hypnotic. During the day, it had looked somewhat inviting, but at night, it was the opposite. Despite being in a densely packed city with plenty of lights and light pollution, the conditions that night, cloudless, quiet, isolated, and not a single light inside the compound, gave us an intense, spooky feeling. I could barely see my hand in front of my face, and we hadn't even gone inside. To avoid being spotted, we kept our flashlights off and used our phone screens to scan the perimeter fence for an entry point. Our search led us to the middle of the south and southeastern edge, near where the seafront met the harbor. While this spot was ideal for being away from the public walkway, it was on a downslope, meaning a longer trek to the main cluster of buildings. The entry point was tight, requiring some effort to squeeze through. Being the smallest, most fearless, and agile of the trio, I volunteered to go first and test the fence. Aside from my jacket snagging on the first try, I made it through smoothly, landing on a solid concrete patch about a foot below. I gave the all clear, and they went next. The tallest and strongest pulled the fence open wider to slip through. Though he was my height, his stocky build made it trickier, but he managed. Last was B, also my height but stocky like A. He got stuck when his jacket caught, and they had to help him through. Once we were all in, the fence snapped back into place, looking untouched. To mark our exit point, we stuck some reflective tape on the wall, just in case. We thought we were prepared. So far, everything had gone smoothly, and we wanted to keep it that way. Since our entry point was closer to the smaller cluster of buildings, half a mile from the main ones, we decided to explore those first. As we got closer, we saw no obvious way in. The main entrance was covered with cardboard. The buildings formed an L shape, with a rectangular one connected to a smaller square one. All the windows were gone, just pitch black holes into nothingness. We spotted a man-sized window on the ground floor of the square building, free of jagged glass, and decided it was our entry point. It was big enough for all of us to climb through comfortably, perfect for a quick escape if needed, not that we expected to be chased. Once inside, we felt safe enough to turn on our flashlights. The window led to a small corridor, with smashed-up toilets to the left and a door to another room on the right. Past the door, we entered the main room of what we thought was the rectangular building. There wasn't much to it, a boarded-up entrance opposite the door we came through, another boarded-up door to the left, and to the right, what grabbed our attention, a creepy metal ladder leading to an upper floor, even darker than where we stood. Before going further, we whispered about how we were feeling. We all agreed we were freaking out because of how dark and quiet it was. We turned off our lights, stayed silent, and listened for any movement. There was nothing but deafening silence. Still, I wasn't satisfied. I reluctantly shouted to see if anyone was in the building, half hoping for a response, half hoping for none. The silence persisted, and I felt a bit more at ease to keep going. We cautiously approached the metal ladder and peered up into the darkness. I took the lead, turning on his flashlight and pointing it upward. The beam barely reached the ceiling, which was covered in thick mold dripping some gross viscous liquid onto the floor below. He suddenly swung his light toward B and me, making us jump. He quietly admitted he was getting a bad feeling about this place, a nagging voice in his head telling him to leave. This surprised me. It was usually fearless, always putting on a brave face and rarely showing anxiety. B, the practical one, reassured him that we always felt uneasy in new places but would be fine since we were prepared. This seemed to settle A, who then climbed the ladder first, his flashlight clipped to his overalls, lighting up his face and the ceiling. His expression looked off, but I couldn't place why. I didn't have time to dwell on it, as I was next up the ladder, followed by B. When we reached the upper floor, our flashlights revealed a narrow corridor with 4 doors, 2 on each side. The 2 rooms on the left were pitch black, while the ones on the right had a faint glow from the city lights outside. The light was barely comforting, doing little to push back the oppressive darkness. We entered the first room on the right and froze as we processed what we saw. A wooden chair in the middle, facing the window. On closer inspection, it looked oddly new. We chuckled quietly at how cliché it seemed, but we were all uneasy. Moments after our laugh, we froze again. A sound, like a twig snapping, came from the dark room across the hall. We whipped around, shutting off our flashlights, and stared at the gaping doorway, waiting for something to emerge. It felt like time stopped. Not a muscle moved as the darkness seemed to swallow us, 10 times more intimidating than before. After what felt like forever, I slowly approached the dark room. The 4-step distance felt like an endless hallway as the doorway loomed over me. I reached the frame and listened. Nothing. My mind raced. If someone was there, they could be inches from my face and I wouldn't see them. Or they could be ready to jump me. Still, nothing stirred. I raised my flashlight, hesitating to turn it on, terrified of what I might see. I could back out, but curiosity held me there. I closed my eyes, clicked the light on, and not being dead, slowly opened them. I was confused. There was nothing. No twigs, no objects to snap, nothing that could have made the noise. B and A joined me, equally puzzled. I started to feel silly for reacting to nothing. Maybe it was a sound from outside. Just to be sure, I stepped into the room to check behind the door. Then my heart skipped a beat. In a split second, something appeared, smashed into my face, and vanished behind me. My legs gave out. Project. I collapsed against the wall, curling up in shock. Everything happened so fast yet felt like it took ages. As my senses returned, I heard B talking, his voice a blur at first before becoming clear. "Damn pigeon," he exclaimed quietly, helping me up. Of all things to scare the hell out of me, a pigeon. I laughed it off, regaining my bearings, but then I noticed something. "Where's A?" I asked. B looked startled, saying I had been there just 5 seconds ago. We searched the upstairs rooms. No sign of him. Growing worried, we hurried down the metal ladder to check the ground floor. Still nothing. This wasn't like he wouldn't just vanish, even after a scare. B and I picked up the pace, climbed out the window we'd entered through, and split up to circle the L-shaped building in opposite directions. We bumped into each other again. Without it, our concern turned to alarm. It was nowhere to be found. Let me start by saying that I moved to a rural town in the panhandle of Texas in 2007 with my ex and his family. I had no family there and knew no one except his family. That is, until I began speaking to my neighbor, Maria. She was around my age, liked the same things I did, and also had a son, so we quickly bonded and became close friends. Maria was a small, petite, athletic girl who loved to run and exercise, always active. She had a routine where she would go for a run every night down the old country road we lived on. It was quiet most of the time with very little traffic, and like clockwork, she would leave at 6 p.m., run for an hour, and come back by 7 p.m. every night. About 6 months after I moved there, around February 2008, Maria began telling me about these weird lights she'd see over in a patch of forest across from our houses. She said that for a week every night she would see them there. One by one, they would appear, stay stationary, then slowly fade and disappear. This piqued my interest because I was an avid researcher and loved everything paranormal. I told her I would go with her that night to see the lights for myself. Right before we were set to leave for her run, I got a call from my boyfriend saying he had a flat tire and needed me to pick him up. I told Maria I had to go and that I'd join her another night. She said okay and set out on her run alone. I was gone maybe 45 minutes, and when I came back, I was met by Maria sitting on her porch, pale as a ghost. Now, Maria is a Mexican girl with a very dark complexion, so it really freaked me out when I saw that she had no color in her face. I rushed over to her and asked, "What's wrong?" "One of them came after me," she said. "What? What came after you?" I asked. "The UFO. One of the UFOs came after me." I sat down and listened as she told me what happened after I left. She explained that she was on her run when the lights appeared again. She stopped to try and videotape them on her cell phone, so I could see them too. She said she took out her phone and started snapping pictures. She'd taken about 3 when suddenly, even though her phone was fully charged, it died. Frustrated, she stuffed it back in her pocket and looked back at the UFOs, expecting them to be gone. But they weren't. In fact, they were closer to her now. This obviously freaked her out, so she decided to start running back home. But as she turned, she noticed one of the lights began moving toward her. She ducked down into a tall bush, certain it was coming for her. To her relief, it just flew over her and then disappeared. She ran the rest of the way home and waited for me. Needless to say, she didn't go out running for a while after that. About a month later, she finally decided she had overreacted and that she would go for a run again. She asked me to come with her, but I declined. Looking back now, I think I was lucky I didn't go that night. She said she'd be back soon and that she'd see me in a bit. About 5 minutes after she left, I saw bright lights outside my window. My curtains were drawn and they moved past really fast, so I assumed it was just Maria's mother. She had mentioned coming over to take Maria to the store. 20 minutes passed, and I decided to go outside for a smoke. I was halfway through my cigarette when I saw them. 3 balls of light in the field straight across from my house. They were close to the ground, just floating there. I thought to myself, wow, I can't wait to tell Maria. They stayed there for about an hour before suddenly shooting up into the sky and disappearing. At that very moment, Maria's mother pulled up. She got out, knocked on Maria's door, and when there was no answer, she went inside to check. But Maria wasn't there. When she came back out, I assured her Maria was probably still running and would be back soon. We waited, but Maria never showed up. Hours turned into days, days into weeks, weeks into months. Nothing. Even with an extensive search, no sign of Maria was ever found. She is still missing to this day. I think about her a lot, always wondering if those lights had anything to do with her disappearance. I know what I saw that night, and I also know how afraid she was after her encounter. Now, after hearing other stories like this, I can't help but wonder even more. If my beautiful friend Maria ended up like one of those other people, abducted, murdered, and dumped. Just another missing person on a list, forever unresolved. First, I want to say that I'm a believer in the paranormal. Almost all of my immediate family members have had experiences with it. This happened to me when I was 16 years old. My family was on vacation in Florida, and I couldn't go because I had to work. I stayed with my aunt for the month of August, and we had a great time. However, I ended up coming down with a nasty fever, so I was bedridden for a week. And while I was stuck in bed, something seriously freaky and strange happened to me. Now, before I go on, there are a few things about my aunt's apartment I need to share. My aunt lives with my grandmother, but at the time, my grandmother was also away with my family. My grandmother has lived there since she was in her 40s. She's 62 now, and she's always believed the apartment was a little haunted. She's had experiences on many different occasions, from things moving on their own to hearing whispers at night. My aunt also believes it's haunted, but she has even stronger reasons. Once, when my mother was staying with them, she had this freaky experience. My aunt was coming home late after a night of partying, and my mom was still awake when she entered the room. After my aunt closed the door, my mom asked, "Who was that behind you?" My aunt replied, "No one." I came home alone, but my mom swore she saw a dark figure follow my aunt into the room. So when I came down with my fever, I was forced to stay in bed. I had to call in sick to work, and basically, I just watched TV all day. The first few nights, I didn't notice anything weird. I was a little afraid to sleep alone since my aunt's room was pretty creepy, but her dog, Lola, stayed with me. Even though she provided some comfort, I was still uneasy. And then, one night, something very strange happened to me. For some reason, that specific night, I couldn't sleep. I was burning up, shivering, and my head was pounding. As I lay there in the darkness, I noticed Lola suddenly shoot up and walk over to the edge of the bed. She stood there, staring at the closet. I got a little freaked out. Animals have better senses than humans, after all. "Lola, get back here," I whispered. But she stayed there, still staring at the closet. I tried to shrug off the fear, but it lingered. Closing my eyes, I began to drift off when I felt something touch my face. It was cold and sharp, almost like a fingernail. I swiped at my face, thinking it was just one of those random itches you get. I started to fall back asleep when, a few minutes later, I felt it again. Only this time it dragged across my cheek. I thought it was Lola, so I told her to stop. That's when I realized she was still at the foot of my bed. That cold, sharp feeling was still there on my cheek. I stayed completely still for a few seconds before retreating under my covers like a little kid. I know it sounds funny now, retelling it, but I was truly scared. I was home alone, and something sharp and icy had just run across my cheek, almost like someone was dragging a fingernail over my skin. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I told my aunt about it. When I got to the part about the sharp, icy touch on my cheek, her mouth fell open. She then told me a story about how she had felt the exact same thing once. Only in her case, she woke up with a mark on her face. I don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was just my fever playing tricks on me. But I know I felt something. And the fact that my aunt had a similar experience only fuels my belief that her apartment, and especially her room, is haunted. To this day, I still don't go into her room alone. I live in Alberta and have been working part-time at a synagogue in Calgary for just over 10 years. This happened during my first year working there, but it's always stuck in my mind. The synagogue had recently purchased the building from a church, which had bought it from another church years before. The building was constructed in the 1950s as a church and is fairly large as far as churches go. My shift started at 6 p.m., and I was usually there until 11:30. The night was going normally, and as usual, I was the last one in the building. I had finished tidying up the kitchen and was making my final rounds when I heard something downstairs. The basement was a finished area that was regularly used for religious schools and the Out of the Cold program, which helps people who don't have a place to stay at night. I walked down the stairs to the landing. At the far end of the landing, there was a doorway leading to a hallway that was always dark. As I looked around the landing, I saw a child standing in the doorway, playing and singing. I couldn't make out the song, but I spoke up, "Hi there. I'm closing up the building for the night." The child looked in my direction and then ran down the hall. Having been up and down that hallway countless times, nothing seemed unusual at first. I started walking down the hallway, calling out, but there was no answer. All I could hear were the child's giggles. About halfway down, the hallway curves to the left, so I assumed the child had run around a corner. But when I turned the corner myself, I saw a tall figure. I called out again, "Excuse me, I'm closing up the building." The figure turned around, and suddenly everything felt very wrong. My heart sank. All I could see were its glowing green eyes, and I felt an intense cold wash over me. Breaking eye contact, I ran back down the hall, through the landing, and up the stairs. I exited through the self-locking doors at the top of the stairs and went straight to my car without looking back. After getting in, I thought I saw out of the corner of the figure standing just inside the doors. I didn't dare look back at the building as I drove away. I still work there, but I avoid that hallway as much as possible. When I do have to go down there, I make sure the lights are on and it's earlier in the evening. I also ensure I'm out of the building before 11 p.m. now. I haven't seen the figure since that night, and I hope I never do again. When I was in my early 20s, I worked the graveyard shift at a 24-hour Walmart stationed in the toy department at the back of the store. I usually worked alone, though occasionally a friend would help me stock shelves. Unless we were swamped with freight, you did your job and left at 7 a.m. The first time I encountered the man we later dubbed Rat Man was around midsummer, 2 years into my job. He'd show up around 5 a.m. to browse the Hot Wheels cars. He was a collector, part of this group of men in their 50s and 60s obsessed with snagging these little 97-cent treasures. I was typically in the back, tossing trash in boxes when he'd come in. He never spoke to me or seemed to notice me, but I'd catch glimpses of him coming and going. One morning, I happened to be on his aisle when he arrived. He got about 2 inches from my face and introduced himself. I can't for the life of me remember his name, but he was about 5 feet tall, overweight, and probably in his late 50s. His breath was horrific, like rancid, rotting garbage mixed with onions or something worse. He'd get uncomfortably close, and that first encounter gave me the creeps, like the vibe you get from some guy at a bar you don't want hitting on you. I brushed it off, thinking nothing of it. But then he started showing up earlier, trying to catch me on the sales floor. He'd sneak up behind me, startling me, or try to touch my shoulder. Once, he grabbed a box I was stocking and held it in front of his crotch, offering to hold it while I pulled items out. I was young and naive back then, unsure how to handle a creep like him. I'd only dealt with a few creepy guys before, and they'd disappear after one encounter, so I figured he was just a weirdo. That is, until one morning when he asked me out. Oh boy, here we go. I had to figure out how to shut this down and hope he'd leave me alone. He approached me and said, "I noticed you like eating at Chinese buffets. You were there yesterday with your friend. I want to take you there. You seem to like the fresh fruit and stir-fry noodles. What the hell?" I hadn't seen him at the restaurant, but my friend and I had been there for lunch the day before. He must have been watching us, unnoticed. The place was nearly empty since my friend and I always went after the lunch rush. She had anxiety and hated crowded places. I froze and mumbled, "No thanks, I'm really busy." I was shaken but relieved when he left me alone that morning. The next day, he didn't show up, and I had 2 days off after that. When I returned to work that Friday, sure enough, there he was at 5 a.m., rifling through the Hot Wheels. I was running behind and still had boxes to stock. He kept staring at me, so I called my friend over the intercom and asked for her help. She knew about this guy, so she came over and stocked the aisle he was in. I kept working, thinking he'd left. But as I pushed my cart back to the stockroom and turned the corner, he popped out from behind the door and grabbed my arm. I twisted away and snapped, "Don't touch me. You scared me." He apologized, saying he was just looking for me and wanted to know if I was always off on Wednesdays and Thursdays since he'd come in and I wasn't there. I lied, telling him my schedule changed often. Then he said, "I don't think that's true. Every Thursday afternoon, you go to the grocery store with an older woman in a green car. This guy was stalking me. I did go to the store with my mom on Thursdays." I broke away from him and ended the conversation. The next day, he came in again, walked right up to me, and asked me out to lunch. I told him no, I was too busy and not interested in dating, then walked off. Early on, my friend and I had a few brief chats with him where he made creepy comments about liking young girls dancing close to him. We thought he was a pervert, and my friend nicknamed him Ratman. One morning after work, around 10 a.m., I was getting ready for bed when my phone rang. This was back before everyone had cell phones. I was about to crawl under the covers but got up to answer. The voice on the other end chilled me to the bone. It was Ratman. "Hi, Sally, I hope I didn't wake you." "Want to go to the movies with me tonight?" I yelled. "How the hell did you get my number?" He claimed my friend gave it to him, saying I was secretly interested but too shy to admit it. I knew my friend would never do that. I hung up on him and confronted her the next night. She was furious and swore she'd never give out my number. At the time, my boss was sitting with us at the lunch table and overheard. He asked what was going on, and I learned he'd gotten a call at the store at 9 a.m. the previous day from someone asking to verify my employment and requesting my current number. This was long before strict privacy policies, so my boss, thinking I'd applied for another job, gave the guy my number. Ratman kept calling and harassing me. During my next 2 days off, he called at least 30 times, leaving messages on my answering machine, some crying, some screaming, asking why I didn't love him, others rambling about a trip we'd supposedly take to Mexico, and how he couldn't wait to see me in a swimsuit he bought me. The guy was unhinged. After that, I'd spot him watching me from across the food court at the mall or in stores I was shopping in. I called the police, but it did no good. I changed my number, and he eventually stopped coming to the store. My boss said he'd have escorted him out if he showed up, but he got transferred out of state, and Ratman would still pop in occasionally. I switched departments, stopped stocking toys, and moved to a new apartment. I've long since left that town, but still keep in touch with my friend from Walmart. Up until 5 years ago, she said he was still coming into the store, older, but just as creepy, and had started harassing another young girl who worked there. This story takes place one summer when I was 14 years old. It was around 11 p.m., and I was in my bedroom on my computer. I had just gotten home. I was living with my brother at the time because my parents were in Florida for a while, so just the two of us had access to the house. I needed a photo of myself for something, I don't remember what, so I opened my camera roll to look through pictures. What I found immediately made my whole body freeze. I couldn't move. I closed the camera roll and sat on my bed for a while, shaking as tears of fright welled up in my eyes. After gathering some courage, I reopened the camera roll to look again. I stared at the photo for at least 10 minutes, growing more uneasy with each passing second. When I checked the timestamp, my distress only deepened. The picture had been taken at 9:45 p.m. What made this worse was that my brother and I had left the house at 8 o'clock to get dinner. No one should have been home when that photo was taken. Too afraid to leave my room, I picked up my phone and messaged my brother, "I'm really scared right now and can't move. Can you come here?" When he asked what was wrong, I sent him the picture from my computer along with an explanation. At first, he thought it was a joke and just said good night, but when he heard me seriously crying after I called him back, his tone changed. He came to my room armed with a golf club for protection. At this point, we were both scared shitless, staring at the blurry picture of a man we didn't recognize. We decided to check the entire house to see if anyone was still there. We methodically searched all 4 floors of our house. The top 3 floors revealed nothing unusual, but when we reached the basement, "Holy shit," my brother whispered. I looked toward the back corner where the cellar door leads outside. Both the door and the hatch covering the exterior steps were wide open. We immediately called the police. They told us to lock all doors and call back if we heard or saw anything suspicious. We secured the house and spent the rest of the night together in my brother's room. Whoever had broken into our house must have opened my computer and accidentally activated the camera. They probably hit the space bar while the camera was running in the background, unknowingly taking a picture of themselves. To this day, I still wonder why someone would break in without taking anything. Nothing was stolen. No drawers or cabinets were disturbed. Nothing seemed out of place except for that terrifying photo and the open cellar door. My brother moved out just days later, too afraid the intruder might return. About 9 years ago, when I was 16, I was staying with some friends while my mom and I took a cooling-off period after constant arguments. We were too similar, always clashing over the smallest things. I ended up staying with my friend for about 2 months. The calm atmosphere was good for me. Chaos and drama seemed to follow my mom throughout her life, and I hated it so much I thought I hated her too for a while. Teenage angst, I suppose. As my time in that peaceful environment was ending, my relationship with my mom began improving. Distance makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. I texted her saying I'd visit to see how she was doing and if this time apart had been as beneficial for her as it was for me. I know this doesn't sound like a typical mother-daughter relationship, but my mom was an intense person, and that intensity carried over into her parenting. Her reply seemed off snappy and cold. We'd stayed in touch while I was away, and though her mothering skills weren't perfect, she always made an effort to stay involved and ensure I was okay. That's why this text felt strange. But given our history of arguments, I assumed she was just having one of her bad days. Being 16 and stubborn, I took offense. Fine, be that way, I thought. I didn't visit or reply to her cold message. Had I trusted my initial instinct that something was wrong, everything would have been different. About a week passed without contact. I waited for her to reach out first. I was at my friend's house studying for exams when her mom came to get me, her face etched with worry. "Your mom's at the door," she said, but her expression frightened me. I rushed downstairs to find my mom looking horrific. Her beautiful long hair had been hacked off unevenly. Her eyes were swollen and blackened. Deep cuts covered her face and neck, with bruises everywhere. I burst into tears, shaking uncontrollably. Seeing her like that remains the worst moment of my life. My friend's mom brought her inside, fussing over her as she told her story. On the day I'd texted about visiting, 3 drug addicts had broken in and terrorized her for hours. They'd sawed off her hair with a knife, lifted our TV, and smashed it over her back. One held a knife to her stomach, trying to stab her while my mom desperately held him off with her legs, winning herself in terror. The most heartbreaking detail? One attacker had read my message and wanted to reply, trying to lure me there. My mom begged and screamed so violently that the man finally sent the cold reply I'd received instead. I'll never forgive myself for not investigating further and just going over anyway. After the ordeal, the intruders trashed the house and stole some items before leaving. My mom called the police and was hospitalized for a week, while I'd been sulking, thinking she was being difficult and that I was better off without her. She hadn't wanted me to see her in the hospital, knowing how important my exams were. Living in a small town, she recognized 2 of the attackers. All 3 were eventually imprisoned. One was a mother herself. The judge showed no leniency due to their extensive criminal records. We were grateful for this rare instance where the victim actually received proper justice. For some context, I'm a 17-year-old girl living in Central Europe with my parents in a small house. Our home has a driveway separated from the street by a large gate that's operated by an electric remote but can also be opened with a key. This detail matters, as you'll see. My area isn't particularly dangerous, but there's been an ongoing issue with some gypsies who, frankly, don't seem interested in blending into society. For example, a few of them once attacked my brother at a street market, trying to rob him after seeing him buy something. Luckily, he was cautious and strong enough to fend them off. I often spend my evenings with my boyfriend, either at his place or mine. On the evening of this incident, I took the bus back to my village from his place, getting off at my usual stop around 9 p.m. It was already quite dark. To reach my house, I have to climb a few stairs from the bus stop, turn left, walk a bit, cross a street, and then head down a hill. The whole walk takes about 5 minutes. As I descended the stairs and turned left, I passed some trash bins. Glancing to my left, I noticed a gypsy man rummaging through the garbage. Our eyes met, and he flashed a creepy grin, pausing what he was doing. I kept walking, avoiding looking back, but then I heard glass breaking. I glanced over my shoulder, and he was standing up, grinning again, and starting to walk toward me. I quickened my pace and crossed the street. As I started down the hill, I could hear his footsteps growing louder, closer. I was on the verge of tears, but held it together. Grabbing my phone, I texted my boyfriend, "If I send you a heart emoji, call the damn cops to my address." The heart emoji was our main one on Messenger. He freaked out, calling me multiple times, but I didn't answer. In hindsight, I should have picked up. It might have scared the man off. I could see my house now and felt a flicker of relief, but then I remembered the damn gate. I had 2 options: open it with a key or ring the house bell and hope for the best. I rummaged through my bag's small pockets, but the keys were nowhere to be found. I risked a quick look back, and the man was just a few meters behind me, no longer grinning but looking angry. I reached the gate and mashed the bell 1,000 times. My dad finally opened the front door and, in a playful, sarcastic tone, asked what was up. I was still stuck behind a gate, with a man now just 2 meters away. I screamed, "Open the damn gate, what's wrong with you?" and started crying. He paused for a second, probably registering the panic in my voice, then hit the remote so fast I barely noticed the gate start to open. Just as the man got close, I squeezed through the gap between the gate and the fence. I felt safe for a moment until I heard a faint whisper I'll never forget. "You better run next time." I collapsed at the door. My dad tried to chase the guy, but he was long gone. We didn't call the police since I couldn't recall enough details about the man to give a useful description, and it felt pointless. Ever since that night, I've been terrified of walking in the dark and paranoid about being watched. I know my fear might be irrational, but I can't shake it. Part of me doesn't even want to because it keeps me hyper-aware of my surroundings. I work in a retail store that's not exactly the finest in the neighborhood. We stay open until 10 p.m., and after around 9 o'clock, most employees, except the cashier, are busy with nightly closing tasks, so the floor is usually empty. The store tends to get quiet after 9 o'clock, with hardly any customers coming in. At the time of this incident, I was 16 years old and stationed at the register. Around 9:30 p.m., a customer walked in. I did my usual routine, greeting him with a cheerful, "Hi, do you need any help?" He was tall, around 6 feet 2 inches, which was intimidating since I'm only 5 feet 1 inch, and had a large scar across his face. Something about him gave me a bad feeling, but I couldn't just refuse to help someone because they looked shady, so I brushed it off. He gave me a slight smile, looking me up and down, before asking where the clearance section was. The clearance items were all the way in the back of the store, on an odd-end cap that was easy to miss. Since customers often got lost trying to find it, I offered to show him the way. As we walked to the back, he didn't keep a normal distance. I didn't realize how close he was until he leaned in and hissed in my ear, "Hey girl, you got a really nice ass." I froze. No customer had ever been that blunt with me before. I pretended I didn't hear him and sped up my pace to the clearance section. When we got there, I turned around, and he was closer than I expected. His smile looked wrong, unsettling. "Are there any cameras here?" he asked. My stomach dropped. I knew the other employees were in the back counting money, and there were no real cameras in this part of the store. But there was a fake security camera bubble nearby, so I pointed to it with a shaky voice and said, "Yeah, there are a few." His face darkened, and he looked pissed. I walked back to my counter without saying a word, keeping an eye on him to make sure he couldn't sneak up on me. Eventually, he came up to the front without buying anything. He leaned across the counter and whispered, "Are there any cameras up here, sweetheart? Would anyone see if I did something to you right now?" I glanced at the actual security cameras above us and a bit too desperately said, "Yes, we have a monitored system. The cameras are right there." He looked angry again but shook his head and backed off slightly. "Fine," he growled. "How about I come back some other time and find you where there are no cameras? Then you'll see what I do to you." I was terrified. I didn't have a car yet and sometimes had to wait outside for a few minutes after closing for my ride. Our cameras were terrible, so I knew if he waited for me, he could easily find me somewhere without surveillance. I just stared at him frozen until he finally walked out, looking smug. I immediately called my manager, begging him or one of the floor employees to come sit with me until the store closed. He refused, leaving me alone for the last 15 minutes. Thankfully, the store closed normally, and no one was waiting outside. I made sure to tell some coworkers about the incident in case something came of it. I was off for the next 2 days, but when I returned, a manager I was closer with pulled me into the office. He showed me footage from our cameras and asked, "Hey, is this your guy?" I nodded, and he frowned. "He's come the past 2 nights, looking around the store for you." I was speechless. Being threatened was bad enough, but knowing he was actively searching for me was a whole new level of fear. Thankfully, management made sure I wasn't left alone after that, and the guy never came back. I still work at the same store, now as a manager. After years in retail, not much phases me anymore. Plenty of weird things happen in this job, but I still wonder if that guy was just trying to scare the hell out of me, or if he was actually planning something. To give some background, this story takes place in the mid-90s when I was about 7 years old. I'm a man now, but back then I was just a kid raised by my grandmother. She looked after me, my sister, my 2 younger cousins, and a few neighborhood kids. I was the oldest. My sister was a year younger, and my cousins were around 4 or 5. We spent most of our time playing outside since my grandmother, who was getting older, stayed indoors a lot. To keep ourselves entertained, we'd create little plays, rehearsing them daily in her garage. We'd use the automatic garage door as a curtain for our makeshift stage. We lived in an urban neighborhood where it wasn't unusual to see people out and about at all hours. Kids playing, cars parked everywhere. On this particular day, I noticed a burgundy van circling our street before it eventually parked in the alley behind the garage. I didn't think much of it at the time. Cars sometimes got lost and ended up there. We closed the garage door to take a water break, and after a few minutes, I decided we were ready to rehearse again. I opened the garage door, and there was the van, now idling right in front of us, its exhaust spewing black smoke into our faces. After what felt like forever, a man got out of the van and approached us. He said we were all terrific actors and asked if he could watch us rehearse. I felt uneasy about him, but as a kid always eager for an audience, I told him it was okay. The man took a particular interest in my sister, who had a dance routine in our play. I still remember his words vividly, as if he whispered them to me yesterday. He stared at my sister and said, "I like the way you dance. Would you come with me and dance for me?" Immediately, as the oldest, I felt something was wrong. I thought about the trouble I'd get into if anyone caught us talking to a stranger. Our community was tight-knit, and most neighbors knew each other. My family had lived there for years. The man swung open the back doors of his van, revealing an empty interior with no seats. Even at my young age, I could tell the seats had been removed, which struck me as odd. He smiled creepily and told my sister her shoe was untied, offering to tie it for her if she sat on the floor of the van. My sister, being naive, hopped onto the step of the vehicle and stuck out her leg. The man started tying her shoe and then told us he had an audience waiting to see our play. He said we just need to get in the back of the van and ride up the road to where the stage was. I was tempted to go. I was always up for an adventure, and staying inside at my grandmother's wasn't exactly thrilling. But as I considered it, I saw the man begin to lift my sister into the van, not aggressively, but like someone picking up a toddler from a high chair. I knew something was terribly wrong. I started saying we had to go, but my feet felt glued to the ground, frozen by fear. Panic set in, and just as I was about to lose it, I saw my dad's car pulling up from the opposite side of the alley to park in the empty lot next door, where our family usually parked. He must have gotten off work early that day. He screeched to a halt, didn't even take the keys out of the ignition, and sprinted toward the van after spotting my sister inside. My sister, shaken by the look on Dad's face, started crying and ran to him. He guided her to me and my cousins, and we quickly pulled her into our arms. The man's eyes widened like he'd seen a ghost. He bolted around to the driver's seat, jumped in, and sped off with the van's rear doors still flapping open. My dad, who I should mention was a sheriff in the county, drew his weapon and chased the van on foot. He kept up for about 2 blocks before the van turned left and disappeared down a one-way street. Dad came back to check on us, and all 4 of us kids were sobbing. My grandmother came outside to see what was happening and was in disbelief that this had happened under her watch. I overheard a neighbor mention they'd seen the same van cruising the street earlier that week after hearing my dad describe it. That was the only time I ever saw my dad cry, probably because he realized how close he'd come to losing his only daughter. I never saw the van again. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if we'd all gotten into that van, or if my dad hadn't come home early. As for the man, I assume he either got arrested, fled the state, or met some kind of justice. The worst possibility I can imagine is that he found another little girl to dance for him. I'm just grateful it wasn't my sister. At the time of this story, I was 18 years old. I'd had a rough past, but had finally gotten my life on track. I moved out and got my own place. Everything was going great. Feeling like I didn't want to be lonely in my new home, I decided to get a roommate. As soon as I could, I put an ad in the papers looking for someone to share the space with. A few days later, I got a call. A light, friendly female voice greeted me from the other end. "Hello, my name is Lucy," she said, sounding delighted. "I'm calling about your ad for a roommate. I think you'd be perfect." We arranged to meet the next day at a local cafe. I didn't want to meet anywhere private after hearing horror stories about roommates turning out to be not who they seemed. The next day, we met up, got to know each other, and hit it off. Lucy was a tall, petite blonde with bright blue eyes. She wore minimal makeup, looked healthy, and we bonded instantly. We had so much in common, similar tastes in music, books, movies, and even video games. We became fast friends, and as soon as possible, she moved into my place. I finally had a roommate. The first few months were amazing. We had pizza nights, movie marathons, and I'd have happily called her one of my best friends. We grew very close. But after a few months, things started to change. Lucy became more distant and, frankly, a bit strange. At first, it was small things like losing her temper over nothing or getting up in the middle of the night to pace up and down the hallway. But then it got worse. One night, I'll never forget, August 5th, 2010, 6 years ago. I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of banging. I knew it was Lucy, so I wasn't too worried at first. Almost every night, she'd slam the cupboard doors shut over and over for about half an hour. Usually, I'd check on her, and she'd just keep going, staring at me with a chilling look, wide eyes, parted lips, head tilted. But this night, I didn't get up. I sighed, pulled my pillow over my head, and tried to ignore it. Then I heard quiet sobs. It broke my heart to hear her crying, but I stayed put. Suddenly, I heard loud pounding footsteps racing toward my room. They were so damn loud I shot up in bed. Lucy stormed into my room with an enraged expression. My mind raced. What the hell was going on? She collapsed to her knees and started laughing hysterically, staring at me with those same wide eyes and tilted head, but this time her laughter was loud and unhinged. I called her name, but she just kept laughing. I got out of bed, slowly walking over to her. I crouched beside her, and she stopped laughing abruptly. I asked if she was okay. She stood up, said good night in a way that sent chills down my spine, and left the room. I climbed back into bed shaken, but as soon as I did, she started screaming outside my door, high-pitched, terrifying shriek. I checked on her again, and there she was, just standing there, shrieking. Then suddenly, she stopped and started giggling, a creepy, childlike giggle. Out of nowhere, she pulled a damn knife from her back pocket and lunged at me. I pushed her away, ran back to my room, and locked the door behind me. My heart was pounding in my throat. She banged and hit the door for about 10 minutes before finally giving up. I heard her footsteps slowly walk away. The rest of the night was filled with faint laughter and the same cupboard door banging, only louder. Somehow, I managed to fall asleep. I wish I hadn't woken up. The next morning, I got up, showered, and went downstairs to the kitchen. There was Lucy dead, covered in her own blood with a knife beside her. She had taken her own life. I called the police and an ambulance, and they arrived within minutes. I'll never forget that sight. Lucy was mentally ill, and she just couldn't cope. She killed herself. I still live in that house, but without a roommate. I wake up around 2 a.m. every night, but I never hear the banging, the footsteps, or the laughter anymore. It's eerily silent now. This incident happened a little over a year ago, and I still haven't begun to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old woman, 5 feet 4 inches, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new, more rural town compared to where we'd lived before. Our new home was a large ranch-style house with a basement. I was home from college, and my parents had left for the week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with friends who lived several hours away. To help you picture the setting, here's a quick layout of the house. It had 3 entrances, one on the front porch, a sliding glass door on the back porch that locked and had floor-length curtains for privacy, and another door next to my bedroom that led to the garage and basement. From my bedroom door, you could see across the house, through the kitchen, living room, and dining area, to my parents' bedroom door and the stairs leading up from the basement. A few days had passed since my parents left, and everything had been fine. They'd sent me a couple of Facebook messages letting me know they'd arrived safely at their friend's place and were having a good time. That day had gone smoothly, and as the sun went down, I made sure to lock all the doors. It was 11 p.m., and I was in bed, doing my usual nighttime routine of browsing on my laptop. Suddenly, I got this sinking feeling of dread, like I was being watched. It was summer, and we didn't have air conditioning, so I had a large box fan in my window to pull in the cool night air. But that uneasy feeling made me decide to take the fan out and close the window, just in case. After shutting and locking the window and pulling down the curtain, I felt a bit better, but the dread lingered. I got back in bed and tried to keep browsing, but I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I heard a faint scratching sound. I froze, listening closely to figure out what it was or if I recognized it. Our new house was surrounded by some forest, despite being relatively close to neighbors, so I thought it might be an animal or a stray dog wanting to get inside. The scratching stopped after a few minutes, and the house went silent again. I figured it was probably nothing, just an animal, and felt a brief wave of relief. But that relief didn't last. Soon after the scratching stopped, I heard slow footsteps coming from the other side of the wall, descending into the basement. That's when I knew I was in serious trouble. There was no way I could leave the house without passing the basement stairs. We didn't have a landline, and my cell phone was broken beyond repair. I was in the process of getting a new one. I sat there for a moment, panicking, trying to figure out what to do. I knew I had to get out of the house as soon as possible. The longer I waited, the worse it would be. I considered popping the screen out of my bedroom window and jumping out, but the drop was high enough that I risked injuring myself. Plus, if I got hurt, I wouldn't be able to run for help, and I'd be right next to the door the intruder had likely used to get in. So I decided to carefully open my bedroom door, peek out. If the coast was clear, make a mad dash for the front door to sprint to my neighbor's house. I slowly opened the door, letting my eyes adjust to the dark, and crept around the corner to check if it was safe to run. What I saw made me want to vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, something felt off. I squinted toward the basement stairs and made out the shape of a man. What made it worse was that he wasn't standing. He was crawling up the stairs like some kind of nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way I was running now. My only option was to pop the screen and jump out the window. As I was unlocking and opening the window, I heard the handle of my bedroom door turn. When the man realized it was locked, he cooed in a sickeningly sweet, sing-song voice, followed by a loud cackle, and what I can only assume was him throwing himself against the door. I tore the screen out, flung myself through the window, and landed badly on my right foot, certain I'd hurt my ankle. But in that moment, I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbor's house, pounding on their door in a frantic panic. As I yelled for them to let me in, I swear to God I saw the man standing at my window, waving at me. My neighbors finally opened the door after what felt like an eternity. I managed to explain enough for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the cops arrived. The police searched the house and found that the basement lock had been picked and my bedroom door was hanging off its hinges. They couldn't find the man anywhere, and since I'd only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't give a good description. I contacted my parents right away, and they rushed home. The police took my statement and searched the area, but found nothing. After this, my parents and I added deadbolt locks to the basement door and the door leading from the basement to the rest of the house. They also helped me pay for a new phone. What haunts me most is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even evidence the man had gone through anything in the house. It's like he was there for something else entirely. This happened in 2013. A kid named Ricky moved in next door to me when he was about 12, and to put it bluntly, he was kind of a jerk. I remember one time when he was 16, he fell off his skateboard, barely even a hard fall, and cried his eyes out in my driveway. Fast forward to when Ricky was 18. By then, I was heavily involved in selling coke and Molly, and he had become one of my best customers. He'd started hanging out with some pretty shady people, which my parents definitely weren't thrilled about. They had no idea I was dealing, though I was good at keeping it under wraps. Every year, my parents went to the Outer Banks in North Carolina for 2 weeks and asked me to stay at their house while they were gone. I was excited about it because their place was way nicer than the crummy one-bedroom apartment I was living in at the time. Things were going well at the house. My on-again, off-again girlfriend was over a lot, and there was plenty of drugs and alcohol flowing. I was far from a saint back then. I'll never forget what happened, though. It was a Thursday night, and my girlfriend had left hours earlier. Earlier that day, Ricky had seen me outside my parents' place and asked for a front. I told him no. I never fronted anyone, and honestly, I've been using too much of my own stuff to afford it. He didn't take it well, and we got into an argument. I ended up embarrassing him in front of his little group of friends, which probably didn't help. By now, it was around 2 a.m., and I was wide awake thanks to the coke and Molly. I was sitting in the dark, watching Netflix in the downstairs den, a side living room my parents had. There was a window open to the outside, and I'd paused the TV to mess around on my phone, texting and scrolling through Facebook. That's when I heard something. The screen on the window was being slowly slid up. I knew that sound well. I'd snuck in and out of that house plenty of times growing up. I quietly got up and watched the window. Through the curtains, I could clearly see the screen moving inch by inch. I walked over, and as soon as I pulled the curtain back, at least 3 or 4 people scattered. I ran outside to the front, but they were already booking it down the street. I didn't see their faces, but I knew it was Ricky and his friends. I just had that gut feeling. I didn't call the cops. Given I wasn't exactly living on the right side of the law, that wasn't an option. So I went back inside, locked everything up, and the rest of the week went by without incident. I never told my parents about it, and I never saw Ricky again. I called him a few times, but he didn't answer. I even offered to front him, which was a lie. I just wanted to confront him, but he never responded. That only confirmed to me that it was him, and he knew I was onto him. About a month later, I was watching the news, and there was Ricky's face. He'd been arrested for murder. He and 3 of his friends had gone out of town, broken into an elderly couple's home, beaten them, tied them up, stabbed them, and then set the house on fire after robbing it. They all ended up ratting each other out, and Ricky got 35 years for testifying against his co-defendants. It makes me wonder what could have happened if I'd been asleep when they tried to get in that night. I work at a small, family-owned pottery shop in the heart of a tourist-heavy town, often called America's hometown. I've been at the shop for about 3 months, working weekends, and most of the time I'm running the place by myself. My boss occasionally pops in for a few hours to throw some pieces if he has a show coming up, but otherwise it's just me. The shop is small but charming, with all the pottery made in the back of the building and fired in a kiln in the basement. I'm still fairly new, so I'm not familiar with all the pottery jargon, but when a customer asks, I'm required to give them a tour of the building. This is my first job where customer service is a big deal. When people come in, I put on my best fake smile and greet them with a warm, "Hey, how are you?" Most customers make small talk and then go about their shopping. Business has been steady since I started, as the town is usually crawling with tourists this time of year. But this past Sunday was different, slower than usual. An older woman came in, complained about the prices, and left without buying anything. A man and his 2 kids stopped by looking for a gift for his wife. It was a quiet day, so I had some downtime and decided to bring some finished pottery from the back to shelve up front. Shortly after, a man walked in, and I was actually kind of excited. Finally, someone to chat with. "Hi, sir, how are you today?" I said. He looked at me, but didn't respond, seeming distant and out of place. He slowly made his way toward the back of the shop. I tried again, a bit more shyly. "Sir?" He finally made eye contact, so I figured I'd keep the conversation going. "Would you like a tour?" "You seem interested." Before I could finish, he cut me off, speaking quietly. "He burns people back there, you know?" I was completely caught off guard and had no idea how to respond. My face probably gave away in my shock. I've never been great at hiding my expressions, and it's got me in trouble before. After a few awkward seconds of silence, I managed to ask, "What are you talking about?" He stared at me for a moment, then warned me never to go into the kiln room alone with my boss. Without any further explanation, he turned and left. I'm not sure what to make of this. I enjoy my job and actually really like my boss. I haven't spent a ton of time around him, but he's always patient, answering my questions without making me feel dumb, and he seems like a genuinely nice guy. Do I let some creepy customer get in my head, or do I brush it off and act like nothing happened? I'm an 18-year-old girl who just graduated high school about a month ago. I want to share a horrifying true story about a man who stalked me relentlessly for 10 years of my life. My best friend Bree and I went to our favorite beach at the lake, a place we visited every chance we got. It was a simple spot, no camping or loading dock, just a place for swimming and picnics. That day was like any other lake outing. We parked in a pretty good spot, and I locked everything in my car except my keys and towel. Bree did the same. We set our towels on the beach, placed my keys on top, and jumped into the water. At this point in my life, I've been stalked for 7 years. Oddly enough, I didn't know what the guy looked like. I only caught glimpses of him once or twice. He was good at staying in the shadows. While Bree and I swam, chatting about college and our future, she noticed me glancing around and not talking much. "What's wrong?" she asked. I whispered, "He's here." She froze and asked where. I wasn't sure, but I could feel him watching me. I told her we should start making our way to the bank and get out of there. I didn't want to draw attention to us, so we moved slowly, trying to keep up small talk. That's when I saw him. I don't know how, but I instantly knew it was him. He was sitting a ways back on a picnic table, his eyes locked on me. I spotted him and quickly looked away, trying not to show I was bothered, but I could feel a panic attack coming on. Every few minutes, I glanced back, and he was still staring, smiling a creepy, unnerving smile. The next time I looked, his shirt was unbuttoned. We were closer to the bank now. I peeked again, and he was licking his lips, staring at me while rubbing his nipples. "What the hell?" I whispered. Bree whispered back, "Where's he going?" as he stood up. He walked over to his car, parked right next to mine, even though the parking lot was nearly empty. He got in and backed up, and for a moment, I felt a weight lift off me. But he wasn't leaving. Instead, he pulled his car out and parked it behind mine, blocking me in. Bree started freaking out, which didn't help me stay calm. "What do we do?" she said. I grabbed my towel, wrapped it around myself, picked up my keys, and saw him leaning out of his car, looking into my driver's side window. I realized I could see him through my windows. He was masturbating on my car. "Follow me," I whispered to Bree. I yelled, "Hey, how are you?" "It's been a while." Bree looked confused until she saw the large Mexican family down the beach. I waved, and she followed my lead. We walked into the middle of their group, and I cried, "Help me, please." "Do you have a phone?" A man looked at me, confused, and said, "No comprendo." I cursed under my breath and tried to recall my Spanish class. "Telefono por favor," I begged, mustering my best Spanish. He shrugged and said, "No, amiga." I thanked him and dropped my head in defeat. I risked a glance at my car. The man was back in his car and had moved it to the other side of mine. He was frantically searching for me, having lost sight of me in the crowd. This was my chance to get away. I ran across the service road, Bree right behind me, into the wooded area. We sprinted through the woods toward the parking lot. His back was to us as he walked toward the beach, trying to spot me. Sticks and rocks cut my feet through my flimsy flip-flops, but I kept going. With his back still turned, I ran across the parking lot to my car, hiding on the driver's side with Bree right behind me. There was semen all over my door and handle. I used my towel to open the door, and Bree crawled in, staying low. I slid in, threw the towel on the ground, and started the car. As the engine roared, I saw him turn, looking angry and running toward me. I slammed the car into reverse and peeled out. Bree grabbed my phone, calling 911, hysterical. She handed me the phone, and I told the dispatcher what he was driving and his license plate number. She asked what I was driving and said she'd send someone out. About 7 minutes later, I saw police lights speeding up behind me. The speed limit around the lake was 45 miles per hour, but I was going 65. I pulled over, and the officer approached with his hand on his gun, yelling, "Brooke," before reaching my window. I was crying hysterically, not thinking clearly, wondering how he knew my name. He explained that the dispatcher had given him my name and car description, confirming I'd called 911. "Can you please step out of the car?" he asked, still cautious. I got out and hugged the officer, overwhelmed with relief. He was taken aback, but let me. He took breeze in my statements, saying he'd file it with my local law enforcement to add to my case. "Please slow down, okay?" he said before sending us on our way. 3 days later, I went to our local police station. An officer I knew because we called 911 often greeted me and asked what I needed. I asked about my stalking case. He scoffed and said, "What case?" Confused, I clarified, "My stalking case." He told me there was no investigation, no case. "Why not?" "I'm being stalked," I exclaimed. He said they knew who the guy was but couldn't release his information to me. He advised me to carry a mace or a gun because the guy was bad news and a multiple sex offender. "So, go arrest him." "Why are you protecting him when I'm the victim?" I demanded. He got irritated and said, "Look, stalking is hard to prove. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do unless we catch him in the act." It's a he said, she said thing. I yelled, "That's just great. I guess he'll have to hurt me before anyone cares." He nodded, looking sorry, and said, "I'm done. This conversation is over." I stood up, furious. "No, it's not. I want answers about why no one will help me." He apologized again, but said there was nothing they could do. Stalking is illegal in all 50 states, and somehow he's the one protected? What kind of justice is that? I stormed out, feeling like no one could protect me. I've lived in a rural part of Oregon, surrounded by woods, for quite a while. I'm much older now, but looking back, I realize I didn't fully grasp the danger I was in during my childhood days of jumping off big rocks and smashing at hills. It wasn't uncommon to see the occasional hiker pass by and head up the trail behind my house. In Oregon, trails are everywhere, but around my home, the woods were so dense that you often had to forge your own path rather than follow a preset one. With mostly deer trails to guide you, it was easy to get turnaround. What I noticed years later, when I was a bit older, was that not everyone who went into those woods seemed to come out. It could be explained away. Maybe they found another exit or set up a tent. But when you see an elementary school kid and her dog walk in and never return, it leaves an eerie feeling. Especially since she lived down the road, and I never saw her again. For context, I was in elementary school when this particular adventure happened. My neighbor, who I'll call George for privacy, and I decided it would be awesome to explore the forest. We headed in with the sun on our right shoulder to keep track of our direction. The canopy was thick, like a Kevlar blanket, and the darkness and cold air were chilling, but two young boys didn't care about that. We were after adventure. It wasn't long before we stumbled upon our first landmark. 2 or 3 shredded camping tents, some still standing, with tarps, sleeping bags, and other camp items strewn about. We poked around and noticed one tent had deep slashes in its side. A sleeping bag was still inside, along with rotten food and water canteens. It looked like whoever was here had left in a hurry. A bit wary but still curious, we pressed on. The happy-go-lucky vibe turned into silent, cautious steps, eyes scanning our surroundings, no word exchanged. We didn't turn back, though I'll never know why. Our second landmark was a small clearing of trees surrounded by grass and tall bushes. There, we found a single tent. Unlike the first sight, this one looked new, clean, zipped up, with the grass around it flattened as if for walking space. I called out to see if anyone was nearby, but no one answered. We crept closer, listening, but heard nothing inside. I was ready to leave, but George started unzipping the tent. When he opened it, we saw a perfectly dry sleeping bag, fresh food, water, neatly folded clothes, and a small bag of camping gear, including a lantern. George went inside and started rummaging. I told him to get out. It was rude to mess with someone's stuff. After some back and forth, He agreed not to steal anything valuable, but took a piece of string. After about an hour of navigating through trees, bushes, and grass, we decided to head back soon since it was getting late. Just before we turned around, George spotted something hidden behind a log and tightly packed trees. We ran over and found another tent, our third and final landmark. This one looked like it had been there for a while, not torn but weathered. George, of course, wanted to look inside. After some pointless arguing, I gave in, though I wish we'd just left the woods right then. Inside was a sleeping bag, dry blankets, some rope, an axe, and photos of people's faces taken from a distance. The axe unsettled me as a kid. Something told me it wasn't just for chopping wood. George rummaged a bit and found a nearly full disposable camera. While he was kneeling, taking in the scene, I stood watch, noticing a faint, rotten smell. I was getting really uneasy and impatient. Something felt wrong. I told George we should leave, and without argument, he agreed. We started back, and after a while, we heard leaves falling. I looked around, assuming it was natural, but when the sound became rhythmic, I stopped. George stopped too. We stood silently listening. Unlike natural leaf fall, it was too consistent. I looked at George, and his wide eyes told me he'd caught on. Neither of us was breathing. We exchanged a look that said, "Let's get the hell out of here," and picked up our pace in what we hoped was the right direction. The leaf sounds got louder and faster. I was too scared to look back, but George did, and when he did, we both broke into a full sprint. Time blurred with the adrenaline, but after what felt like forever, probably just minutes, we burst into a clearing. It wasn't our street or any sign of civilization, but it was free of trees. We ran to the middle and spotted power lines in the distance, which turned out to be the ones running to our houses. We hurried home, never saying a word to our parents. I was too young to fully understand what was wrong, but old enough to know we shouldn't have been there. Years later, I've been back to those woods. The police have been called multiple times since then, but they never do anything. The second landmark tent has rotted and collapsed, and the stalker or creeper's tent is gone, along with all its belongings. The first site is just more decayed than before. I still find new tents sometimes, but now I know to steer clear. I fear there could be someone out there you don't want to cross paths with, or worse, the owner of whatever chased us all those years ago. I haul freight cross-country, mostly Midwest to West Coast. It's a lonely gig, just me, my rig, and a playlist of Metallica and Johnny Cash that's been on repeat since Obama was president. I'm used to long stretches of nothing. Empty highways, gas stations that look like they're one bad day from collapsing, and diners where the coffee tastes like regret. Last night, I was on a run from Des Moines to Reno, hauling a load of auto parts. It was around 2 a.m., somewhere in the ass end of Nebraska, when this all went down. The road was dead, just me and the occasional semi passing the other way. My CB radio was quiet, and I was nursing a Red Bull, trying to stay awake. The stars were out, bright as hell, and the air had that crisp, late fall bite. Normal night, you know. I was maybe an hour past North Platte when I saw him. Guy standing on the shoulder, thumb out, looking like he'd been spit out by the highway itself. Hitchhikers aren't unusual, but this time of night, in the middle of nowhere, that's a red flag. He was wearing a dark hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. No bag, no coat, just standing there like he didn't feel the 40-degree chill. I slowed down, got a better look. He was skinny, maybe 30, with this weird, twitchy energy, like he was wired on something. My gut said keep driving, but I'm as soft as sometimes. Been stuck on the side of the road myself back in the day. Figured I'd at least hear him out. I pulled over, gravel crunching under my tires, and leaned out the window. "Where you headed?" I called. He jogged up, hands in his pockets, and gave me this lopsided grin. "West," he said. "Far as you're going." His voice was rough, like he'd been yelling all night, and his eyes, man, they were wrong. Bloodshot wide, darting around like he was waiting for something to jump him. I should have peeled out right then, but he looked desperate, and I'm not a total asshole. "Hop in," I said, against every instinct screaming at me to floor it. He climbed into the cab, bringing this smell with him. Not BO, not weed, something sharp, metallic, mixed with sweat and something sour. Like old pennies and bad meat. I cracked a window, trying not to gag, and asked his name. Jake, he said, too quick, like he'd rehearsed it. He slouched in the seat, cap still low, hands fidgeting in his lap. I noticed his knuckles were red, scraped up, and there was a dark stain on his sleeve. Could have been mud, could have been something else. I didn't ask. Just turned up the radio some Skinner, then hit the gas. At first, it was fine. He didn't talk much, just stared out the window, tapping his foot like he was keeping time to a song I couldn't hear. I tried making small talk. You know, the usual driver bullshit. Where are you from? What's your deal? He gave short answers, vague as hell. Around, he said, or just moving on. I figured he was running from something. Bad breakup, maybe, or a warrant. None of my business. But the longer we drove, the weirder it got. He kept glancing at the side mirror, like he was checking for someone behind us. There was nothing back there but darkness and my trailer's taillights. Then I heard it, a faint thump, coming from the trailer. I've hauled enough loads to know what's normal. A loose pallet shifting, maybe, or a tire hitting a pothole. But this was different. Rhythmic, like something banging against the inside of the trailer. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate. I turned down the radio, listening hard. Jake froze, his foot stopping mid-tap. You hear that? I asked. He didn't look at me, just muttered. Hear what? But his hands were clenched now, nails digging into his palms. The thumping stopped, and I told myself it was nothing. Trailers make noises, right? Still, my skin was crawling. About 20 minutes later, it happened again. Louder this time, like someone was kicking the trailer's wall. I pulled over at a rest stop. Empty, just a couple busted picnic tables and a flickering streetlight. Gonna check the load, I said, grabbing my flashlight. Jake's eyes snapped to me, and for a second, I thought he was gonna bolt. Stay here, I told him, not sure why I felt like I needed to say it. He nodded, but his grin was gone, replaced by this blank, hollow look. I hopped out, the cold air hitting me like a slap. The rest stop was dead quiet, except for the hum of my rig's engine and the faint buzz of that streetlight. I walked to the back of the trailer, shining my light on the doors. The lock was fine, no signs of tampering. But that smell was back, stronger now, seeping through the cracks. Metallic, rancid, like a butcher shop left to rot. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. Nothing at first, then a scrape. Soft, like nails on metal, coming from inside. My heart was hammering. I've hauled auto parts, produce, even live animals. Never heard anything like that. I yanked open the door, half expecting a raccoon or some stowaway. The trailer was packed tight, crates of car parts strapped down, no room for anything else. But the smell was overwhelming, and in the corner where the light barely reached, I saw something wet glistening on the floor. Dark, sticky, pooling under a crate. I told myself it was oil, maybe a busted hydraulic line, but my hands were shaking as I slammed the door shut. I didn't check closer. Didn't want to. Back in the cab, Jake was staring straight ahead, hands in his pockets. Everything good, he asked, voice flat. I lied, said, yeah, just a loose strap. But I was watching him now. His hoodie was bunched up, like he was hiding something under it. And his shoes, fuck, how hadn't I noticed before? They were caked in mud, but not just mud. Something dark, flaky, smeared up to his ankles. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, and kept driving. The thumping didn't come back, but the silence was worse. Heavy, like the air was thick with secrets. Around 4 a.m., we hit a stretch of highway with no lights, just my high beams cutting through the dark. Jake started talking, unprompted, his voice low and jittery. You ever do something you can't take back? He said, not looking at me. I laughed, trying to keep it light. Yeah, like eating gas station sushi. He didn't smile, just kept going. Something bad, something that sticks to you, follows you. His fingers were drumming on his knee, and I saw it, a speck of blood under his nail, fresh, not quite dry. My mouth went dry, but I played it cool. We all got regrets, man, I said. He turned to me then, and his eyes were empty. Some regrets scream louder than others, he whispered. That's when I saw the knife. It slipped out from under his hoodie when he shifted. A hunting knife, blade maybe 6 inches, handle wrapped in duct tape. The tip was dark, crusted with something I didn't want to name. My heart stopped. I'm a big guy, 6 feet 2 inches, 250 pounds, but I'm not a fighter, and that knife looked like it knew its way around blood. I kept my eyes on the road, pretending I didn't see it, but my mind was racing. Who was this guy? What was in my trailer? And why the fuck did I pick him up? I needed to get him out. There was a truck stop maybe 30 miles ahead, so I started planning. Gotta piss, I said, casual as I could. There's a stop coming up. You need anything? He shook his head, but his hand was on the knife now, resting like it was no big deal. The rest of the drive was torture. Every time he moved, I flinched, waiting for him to lunge. The smell was back, fainter, but there, like it was coming off him. And once, just once, I heard that scrape again from the trailer, so soft I almost missed it. At the truck stop, I pulled in, heart pounding. The place was half dead, a few rigs parked, a neon sign buzzing over the diner. I'm grabbing coffee, I said, climbing out. You coming? He hesitated, then followed, knife tucked back under his hoodie. Inside, I made a beeline for the cashier, an older lady who looked like she'd seen it all. I slipped her a note while Jake was in the bathroom. Call 911. Guy with me is dangerous. She nodded, barely blinking, and I bought time, pretending to browse the snack aisle. Cops showed up 20 minutes later. 2 squad cars, lights off. Jake was back in the cab by then, and I pointed him out from the diner window. They approached slow, hands in their holsters. I watched them pull him out, cuff him, his face blank like he'd expected it. He didn't fight, didn't say a word. They searched him, found the knife, bagged it. One cop came over, asked me what happened. I told him everything, the thumping, the smell, the blood. He didn't say much, just wrote it down and told me to stay put. They checked the trailer. I wasn't allowed near, but I saw them open it, saw their faces change. One cop gagged, turned away. They wouldn't tell me what they found, just said it was evidence and my rig was impounded for now. I heard them radio for a coroner, though. A fucking coroner. I sat in the diner, chain smoking, till they let me go at dawn. They gave me a ride to this motel, said they'd call when I could get my truck back. That was 12 hours ago. No word since. I keep replaying it. The thumping, the smell, the way Jake's eyes looked like they'd seen hell and brought it with him. I don't know what was in my trailer, but I know it wasn't auto parts. Not all of it. And I can't shake this feeling, like something's still out there watching. My phone's been glitching all day. Texts I didn't send, calls dropping. And just now when I stepped outside for a smoke, I swear I heard it again. That scrape. Faint but close. There's nothing out here but parking lot and highway, but I locked the door anyway. If you're on I-80, be careful who you pick up. Some people carry more than baggage. And if any of you know what the hell I might have stumbled into, tell me. Because I'm not sure I'm done with this, and I'm fucking terrified it's not done with me.